With us today is Sarah Crocker, Saul Miller, Morty Banks, and Norman Pizitz. Norman, I've known your family for many, many years.
Your whole life.
And I look forward to our conversation and you sharing some of your stories about you, your family, and some of the people in Huntsville and what it was like in Huntsville at that time. So maybe to kick it off or start, you share something about Abe and Lillian, your dad and your mom.
Sure. First of all, Huntsville was mill towns and farmers. And back in the 30s, we had about 12,000 people here. That was the population. And of course, the population didn't expand until the government brought in Redstone Arsenal. And I want to say this about that. When they announced they're going to spend $40 million in Huntsville for Redstone Arsenal, people walking around with their mouths open. They couldn't believe $40 million. That was the world, you know. But anyhow, my dad had a couple of stores downtown, one on the square, one on Jefferson Street at the time. He had also another store on the east side of the square.
Well, tell us the names of the stores.
There was the Fair store on North Side Square. The Leader was on the east side, and on Jefferson Street was Pizitz. And at Parkway City, there's a painting of Jefferson Street, and you could see almost the whole sign, Pizitz, painted in there. So,
when did your family move to Huntsville, Norman?
They came here in the 20s, and I'm not sure exactly. Dad had been here. Dad had migrated from Poland, and he went to Tuscaloosa and worked for his uncle, my grandfather's brother, who had a store in Tuscaloosa. And the salesman told the man in Huntsville who also had a store about my dad, you know, what a good person he was, blah, blah. And this fellow wanted to go, his name, I forgot his name now, but he wanted to go to the Florida Land Boom. So he hired my dad, gave my dad a fourth interest in the profits. And his son also was here, gave him a fourth interest, and he retained a half interest. Sometime later, and I don't know how this happened, Dad owned the store. And my mother had migrated from Poland, and her family moved to Atlanta. And Dad had known my mother. Dad was from Bialystok, my mother was from Breslau-Toff. And they knew each other there and dated, I think, sometime. And so Dad, they evidently had been corresponding, and Dad went over to Atlanta and he said, if you want to get married, he said, we'll go to Chattanooga right now and get married, and they did, moved back to Huntsville. And of course my older brother, Harold, was born, and he was 3 years older, so he'd been born about 1926 to 27. And I was born in 29, and younger brother was born 6 years later.
Your mother's family were Zions, isn't that?
Zions, that's correct, yes. They had some stores, they had little neighborhood stores there, and then Dad had a sister that married a man, and they lived in Atlanta also, and they're all, of course, had another younger sister that lived in Birmingham. Mm-hmm. And of course, they're all gone now. But anyway, then I went into the service in 52. And after I got out, we converted, we closed up Dad's store on Jefferson Street and converted, he had already closed the one on the East Side Square, and we converted the one on North Side Square to lady specialty shops. And my older brother and I operated that for years, and then we opened another store at Parkway City when the shopping center opened. And then later on, Dad and I bought out my older brother, and he and I opened another additional store at the mall, another ladies' shop.
And that was called Harold?
Harold's. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was and my folks built a home on Newman in 1935.
It was a very fine
Yeah,
home.
and it's gotten to be in Twickenham now. It's historic. It's how old it was, because when we moved there, I was 4 or 5 years old, and as a kid, because today kids ride the buses, but we didn't have buses. We all walked to school. All the kids would be walking up that hill and up California Street, going to East Clinton, and that was the way we got to school. We walked. We walked. We didn't have snow days. We didn't have rain days.
What are some of your memories during the war?
Well, I remember they let us out of high school to go and collect scrap. And also, they encouraged us to get our parents to buy bonds, government bonds, and got us to buy the little stamps. We put them in the little stamp books, and we could cash them in later. But it was quite a deal. This.
Remember the rationing?
Oh, a guy. Speaking of the rationing, a salesman was working with my dad, and he said, "My tires are so bad." He said, "I can't." He said, "I don't think I can drive any further," because you couldn't buy tires. And Dad called some tire dealers, and they said, "Unless he's got tire coupons, we can't sell him tires." So he called his Uncle Jake, or Morton's Uncle Jake, and he had a used car down there with tires on it. And he took the tires off that car and gave them to the salesman to help him out. So that was very nice thing to do, because the guy couldn't get out of Huntsville even.
So where did you take your scrap to?
We took our scrap to L. Miller and Son.
Yeah. As it was called in those days,
Yeah.
Tennessee Poultry.
Yeah, can I tell about the paper?
Oh, sure.
Tell about the paper? Okay.
Before we get too far ahead into it, tell us about Huntsville High School.
Well, Huntsville High had about 600 students, and we had a good football team and a good coach, and we packed the stadium on Friday nights. I tell you, it wasn't like it is today. I mean, that was a big thing in Huntsville. In fact, even when I got out of service, I would go to the games on Friday nights just to see the games.
Tell us about the coach, about your football coach.
Well, Milton Frank, of course, was probably one of the best coaches in this part of the country. And he had winning teams. He coached some good guys, sent some good ball players to the colleges. And he lived on Randolph, corner of Randolph and Andrew Jackson, I believe it was. Yeah.
Either that or White Street.
No,
Was it called Fifth?
No, it was Andrew Jackson.
Andrew Jackson.
It would be that now.
Yes.
Was Andrew Jackson and Randolph right on the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And we, at one time, rented the house across the street from him. So the house on the corner there, on the corner of Randolph and Andrew Jackson, I burned the garage down when I was a kid. I didn't mean to. Kids, little kids playing.
But you played football for Huntsville High.
Played football, and Sandy Goldstein played, and Sandy was my hero, because if I got in any problem in football, he was a lot bigger than I was. All I do was tell him, and he took care of everybody. He took care of them. Sandy wouldn't be considered a big guy today, but in those days, we considered him big. He was about 5'10" and a half, 5'11", about 190, 95 pounds, and that was a big guy, because Brick Warden and Jim Reeder, those guys. You look at them, and my wife wanted to know, said, "How do all you little guys play?"
Tell us about the Jewish kids at Huntsville High.
Well, there was Leola Damson, was the only other one I can think of.
She's the daughter of
Joe Damson, Joe and
Harriet.
Harriet
Mm-hmm.
Damson, and Leola and Sandy, I guess, and myself.
And before you, there was
Harold.
my dad.
There was Harold and Buddy, and who else? Was there any others? Sandy, of course. Sandy was in high school when I was there. Now, Sandy was a junior when I got to high school. He was 2 years ahead of me.
Was there some kids named Bloom?
Ben Bloom.
Ben Bloom.
Now, Ben and his sister, what was his sister's name? Just a minute, I'll tell you. Ben Bloom.
The parents were Harry and Tilly.
Louise Bloom. Louise Bloom was her name. They were there. They were older than we were. And but now, the Blooms, Ben Bloom, the Blooms, can we talk about them a little bit? Okay. The Blooms had the Boulevardy Hollywood store downtown I think they had one store on Northside Square, just a shoe store at one time. Then they had the ladies' shop over on Washington Street down from Donovan's. And Ben was really a nice guy, a young man, you know, and after he graduated college, he opened a ladies' manufacturing clothing business. Did very well. And Wolf Manufacturing. Did very well in it. And Mr. Bloom was a character. They had the Huntsville Utilities was right next door to Dad's store on Jefferson Street. And Mr. Bloom, when he had something in mind, you know, you could never tell him about it. He didn't see you, he didn't know anything. He came flying by Dad was standing out in front of the store, and they were all friends, you know. They used to play bridge together and everything. Went right by Pop, and didn't say hello, into the Huntsville Utilities. And there's a lot of people waiting to pay. He just walked right by and walked up to the window. And when he came out, Pop said, "Bloom," says, "Didn't you see all those people standing there?" He said, "No," he said, "I didn't see them." I mean, you know, we had some characters. He's a nice guy. I liked him. Yeah, and he's a nice fella. And Sandy, and there was a fellow named Jacoby. There was a family named Jacoby here in town, and I don't know what.
Nathan Jacoby.
Nathan Jacoby, and he had a store next to Hutchins. When Hutchins burned, Dad, we all went down to town that while the fire was going on to see what was going on, because Dad's store was just 3 or 4 doors up, and Jacoby was right next door. But Jacoby was there, and Dad was watching. When I was watching him, and Jacoby would open his door to the store, and then he'd close the door. And finally, Dad said, "Jacoby, what are you doing?" He said, "I can't decide whether to let the smoke in or lay it out." You know, for the insurance. I mean, we had a lot of characters when you think about it. So.
Do you remember the Foyers?
Yeah, Henry Foyer. They lived on Hermitage when we were all kids. And Henry, by the way, Henry was in school when I was there. I don't know if he moved after elementary, or they moved from here or not.
Well, they actually, at one time they lived next door to my grandparents on East Clinton.
And they had a store, Foyer had a store on Jefferson Street also. Okay. Jefferson Street, there was Foyers, and Harrison took over that building later, and there was Damson, Harry Damson, Joe Damson, then Pop, and Becker was next door to Hutchins too at one time, before Becker moved into the next block on Jefferson Street.
Okay.
So,
well, let's talk about, you mentioned the Harrison store. There's the Union Dry Goods store. Let's talk about
Union Dry Goods. Let's talk about the Harrisons. Harrison, the reason Harrison came here, Dad brought him in from New York to run his store on the square, to manage the store.
Okay.
And he, after a while, he decided to resign and go in business for himself. And Harrison had 2 daughters, Ethel and Sylvia.
And Eleanor.
Was it Eleanor?
Yeah, there were three. Uh-huh.
Was it three daughters?
Sylvia, Ethel, and Eleanor.
Okay, I didn't know. I thought, anyway, Ethel married Ogden McAnally, and after the Damskys closed up or sold their store, Ethel took it over on the square there, on Northside Square. There was, I don't know what Ms. Damsky's first name was, but the daughter's name was Louise, and the shop's name was Louise, the Louise shop. And she was kind of in competition. You know, we were all in competition with one another there. And they're nice people. As a matter of fact, I dated Louise, the daughter, mainly one some between high school and college, you know, and pretty girl. And they moved from Huntsville. They were nice folks. But that's about, they lived in an apartment over right across the street here, I think. Matter of fact. There's some apartments, isn't there, right?
Yes. There's apartments right across Clinton Street, and then there's some right on Lincoln Street.
Right in here somewhere.
Yeah.
They lived right in here, yes. Okay. And I remember coming over to pick her up, you know, and we enjoyed.
In a horse and wagon or
Well, it's very questionable. What about Lawrence Goldsmith, those Goldsmiths there? Well, you know, because I didn't know the older Mrs. Goldsmith. After she died, he lived at the hotel. He built the Russell Erskine Hotel, and I knew Lawrence Jr. And Lawrence Jr. and Margaret Ann, we used to meet them out at Ski Beach. My Ronnie, my younger brother, and I, and we ski. You know, just we didn't. It wasn't a planned deal, just a place we would all go to ski. And he was awfully good to her, and he would ski her all over the place and spend hours with her. And they were good people. If they said they're going to do something, they did it. You know, and they expect you to do the same thing. But the Goldsmiths took care of the oldest Jewish section of the cemetery for years. When Mr. Goldsmith didn't do it any longer, Lawrence did. And they sold that home to the folks that had the Burger Kings, used for an office, and then they have sold it to, well, Danny Alms is the husband, I can't think of her name.
He's an accountant.
He's an accountant, right. Yeah. She's an interior designer. And that vacant lot, and then my folks owned that old inn right next door to the vacant lot.
Okay.
That's the oldest building in Huntsville.
I forgot they owned the old Huntsville Inn.
That's right, the old Huntsville Inn. And I did get that later. And I sold it to the attorney who was handling some stuff for me.
Can we let's talk about Sandy Goldstein's parents.
Yes, yes.
And Grace.
I didn't know a whole lot about them. I didn't have any association except when I was a kid. I used to walk down to their store when I was at my dad's store, because she gave us had lollipops always. She'd give us. But like I said, they lived on Eustis. I think they lived in a duplex, if I'm not mistaken. It's been so many years, but they were nice people. And Sandy's grandfather had owned a lot of property, I think, in Birmingham, and the reason that the estate skipped Sandy's parents, because the old man, his grandfather, heard one of the kids say that they can't wait for the old man to die so they can get his estate. So he fixed it so Sandy and his cousin inherited everything after the parents died. That's just a story I've heard.
I've heard it too.
Yeah, okay. But Sandy was a good guy, and I used to like, so when Sandy would walk down, because Huntsville High had a tile, this quarry tile floors, and Sandy walked down the hallway like this. I mean, he was just a character. He just couldn't beat him. He's just a really nice guy.
Told us story before we started about how Abe Goldstein would sit on the bench during football games when Sandy was playing.
Yeah, I thought his dad would sit on the bench during the football games, and one time during the game, Sandy inherited he intercepted a pass. I'm trying to say something. And I looked down and there's Sandy running down the field. And there's Abe Goldstein running down behind the team down the field. Abe Goldstein was a little guy. And he always drove these dark Cadillacs. And if you sit in them, you could hardly tell. It looked like the mafia, But they were nice people, And so we didn't have a lot of Jewish families. We had a lot of nice Jewish families here.
Did you associate much with Mort Will?
I hardly ever knew him, other than going and collecting money from he and his dad. That was all I ever knew about him.
Okay.
Nothing.
They were in the wholesale grocery business.
Right, wholesale grocery business on the corner of Clinton and Jefferson. That's where their office was, I recall. So that's what I remember riding my bike all over town collecting those for those $1 or $2 they'd pay me. I was tickled to make that buck.
Yeah.
Yeah, kid couldn't make anybody.
Norman, I think